everyone. Welcome once again to the Pop Culture Yearbook. I'm Captain Logan.
And I am the real Manos.
Manos, we're taking our time machine and we're going back in time. Before we say the date that we're going back in time to, I just got to say that this time machine that we always take back in time has one cup holder. And Manos, you're always putting your drink in my cup holder.
I'm sorry, I am nothing without my coffee.
Okay, that's cool. I guess I'll just hold mine again while it's scolding in my hand. Manos, what date are we going back to this time?
Well, we're taking the Wayback Machine all the way back to that groovy year, 1988.
That groovy year. Is that a nod to the fact that we keep doing the 70s?
No, not at all. I'm thinking about faking out by using as many different decade adjectives as I could for the 80s that has nothing to do with any of them.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious.
But, yeah, it's 1988.
Manos, where were you in 1988?
I was in high school. I was a junior, and I was writing my first play.
Wow.
In 1988.
Well, other things that happened in 1988, that was the year that Stephen Hawking published A Brief History of Time. That was the year that the Hubble Space Telescope first came into operation. And it was also the first year that crack came onto the drug scene.
Hooray!
In comics, it was the year that The Killing Joke was published. It was also the year of the first issue of The Tick, which I would have loved to have talked about, but I've been doing a lot of Tick lately, so I decided not to. It was the year that the Garfield animated series first started. I don't know why I felt the need to throw that in there, but I did. And also the Superboy TV show. That silly, short-lived Superboy TV show. Actually, it was on 3 or 4 years, come to think of it. And then the top 3 movies of the year were Rain Man, Coming to America, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Other movies that were big that year were Die Hard, which also, by the way, happened to be Alan Rickman's film debut. I don't know if you knew that, but Alan Rickman had done lots of TV before that, but he had never been on film, so that was his big debut. And then, of course, now he's giantly huge. And then it was also the year for Naked Gun, Beetlejuice, and Big. Big artists in music that year included Robert Palmer, U2, Guns N' Roses, and Gloria Estefan. And it was the year that Mario 2 came out in the States. Of course, Mario 2 was actually based on another game that really wasn't Mario. And what we got in 1990 that was a real Mario game again, Mario 3, actually came out in Japan for Famicom, which is really sad. They got to play it 2 years before we did.
Although, didn't we get a preview of that game in the Christian Slater movie, The Wizard?
That's right, which I think was 1989.
Yeah.
Well, Manos, what did you choose from 1988?
Well, from 1988, I decided to choose one of my not only favorite animated films, but it's one of my favorite films. It's called Akira.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that was that far back. I've never seen it.
Oh, great. And you didn't choose it for your pick, right?
I didn't, because I've never seen it.
You're starting to worry me. Because you were talking before we started this, like, hey, you didn't pick the same thing. I don't know. I mean, maybe, I guess.
Well, I just want to know if you picked something that everybody's heard of, because I totally did.
Oh, a lot of people have heard of this.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true.
This is from 1988, and this is one of the most important anime, maybe animated films ever made. I really do feel that if you're an anime fan, this is required viewing. Like, you know how they say Citizen Kane is required viewing for, big film fans? The same thing applies to this film. I think it's culturally important. It was, well, see, the thing is, anime or Japanese animation, or at one point during the 80s, it was referred to as Japanimation. And American audience were roughly familiar with the fact that the Japanese did cartoons. There was, of course, Speed Racer, Star Blazers, which was, of course, Yamato in Japan. Battle of the Planets, which was a huge favorite of mine as a kid. That was Gatchaman in Japan. So American audiences, American cartoon buffs had an idea, had an inkling, but Akira was a real tentpole, I always thought, because it really did stand up and say that Japan was a major force in animation. And this film is directed by, Katsuo Otomo. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I apologize if I'm off. And of course, it's based on what was already the popular manga series, which had, I think Dark Horse recently did a great reprint of the whole series. And what they did was they took this whole series and did their best to squeeze it into a 2-hour film. And I think the film is just about as successful as it could have been doing such a thing. I mean, what Zack Snyder had to do with like the 12 issues of Watchmen, multiply that by 100. It was quite a task. The film is a huge spectacle, and there's always something incredible on the screen at every moment, and everything is so detailed and well animated. It's just amazing. The plot goes into the future of Tokyo, which is referred to Neo-Tokyo, and there had been some cataclysm in '88 when the film, of course, was made, and it shoots 50 years in the future, or is it 30 years in the future? I can't remember. And things seem to be leading up to another cataclysm. Now, the cataclysm had to do with science. Scientists were working on the brains of children developing, mental abilities. And, of course, it went kablooey, where one of the children, named Akira, became way too powerful. Jean Grey too powerful. And they apparently were able to get a lid on it, as well as some of the other kids that were in that class, and also developed immense godlike powers. Years later, the kids are actually old, but their bodies haven't changed. It's weird. They look like 8-year-olds as old people. It's really
weird.
Yeah, it's really weird looking. And there's this bike gang led by this teenager named Kaneda, who has the coolest bike I've ever seen. This red bike you always see. And one of his friends, Tetsuo, runs into one of these kids who tried to escape. And long story short, he seems to start developing powers from his run-in. And it just goes worse and worse and worse until just a new horrifying event happens at the end. It just kind of builds and builds. The film is just, it's still exciting to watch even after all these years. Music is just really in your face as far as, setting all the tone. It's action-packed, it's really sad, it's creepy in places. I love it. It's still one of my favorite films of all time, really. And there you go, Akira. And, of course, Akira really did launch pretty much the generations you've seen after this. The real, fan base of anime in this country. Now, of course, there's all sorts of different factions within anime. But, this film really did, put it out there that the animated films coming out of Japan weren't musicals. They weren't just kid stuff. There were teen stuff. There were kid stuff. Yeah. There was adult stuff. This really did change things. And this was a major film in that regard.
Well, and what's funny is that continues to be the case there in a way that it's not here.
Yes, and embarrassingly so.
Yeah. And I don't know why that's happened.
I don't know. There's
especially in I don't know, this is going to sound kind of snide and cynical of me, but especially with so many action films these days that have so much CG in them, they might as well be animated features.
Yeah, I've been seeing the previews for Green Lantern, and it's almost looking like Roger Rabbit.
I felt a little like that when I saw it, yeah.
Except with more animation.
I hate it when I go to a live action movie that's so heavily animated. I have to remind myself that it's a live action feature, where it's like it's jarring to me. It's sometimes it makes it hard for me to suspend my disbelief. Where if finally somebody with a real face comes on screen and I go, oh wait, it's live action. Okay, I forgot.
And of course, this is all cell animation. I'm sure there is some CG here and there.
In '88, I doubt it.
Yeah, well, in regards of CG, I'm thinking more of like, effects here and there.
Yeah.
But outside of maybe tiny effects, this is all like classic cell and all perhaps hand drawn. I mean, just the details, just insane in some of these films, in this film specifically.
Yeah, I really need to sit down and watch that. I'm somewhat embarrassed by the fact that I still haven't.
Yeah.
I did at one point finally sit down and sit through Ghost of the Shell, but I've never seen that.
I enjoy Ghost in the Shell a lot, although I think Akira is superior.
I tell you, the one that I liked a lot, and I don't like anime most of the time, but I did really like Metropolis.
Metropolis is very good, yeah, and I think that may have been the same director. I seriously, if I had a top 10 of films, this would be in. With Pulp Fiction and Ghostbusters.
Wow, that's strong.
I'd probably put this in my maybe top 5 favorite films.
Well, Manos, the thing I chose was something that I'm not necessarily a giant fan of, but it's just really important in comics, and I feel like we might as well talk about it. And this is going to be one of those things that you probably will have as much or more to say than I do, since you were a lot older than me at the time when it came out. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Batman: Death in the Family.
Sweet, love it.
It came out in '88, but went through '89. So the big interesting ploy that DC did happen in '88, which is the big thing I wanted to talk about, which is, hey, there's fans who don't like Jason Todd. Let's let them decide if they're going to kill him or not. And I always thought that was, I mean, it sounds like a giant ploy, but it's also kind of a neat thing to do. I always kind of applauded them for doing something as inventive as that. So for those of you that don't know, what they did was, they set up this 900 number, and for 50 cents a phone call, you could call in and you could vote, does Jason Todd live or does he die? And ultimately, of course, it was voted to kill him, but it wasn't a landslide. It was really close, and it was actually, I looked this up, it was actually 53-43 votes for him to die over 52-71. So like it was really, really close. It was like 100 away. And there's a rumor, and nobody knows if this is true or not, but there's a rumor that Denny O'Neil heard about, where apparently there was somebody who programmed a computer to dial the thumbs down number every 90 seconds for 8 hours. And that if that actually happened, that would have been 200 votes, and he would have paid $100 for it. And then that was enough that swayed the votes to the negative vote.
I'll be honest, I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't either, but it'd be really funny if it actually happened.
I think Jason Todd died fair and square.
Do you?
I do.
Did you vote?
I was too young at the time to really. My parents are really territorial about the things.
Oh yeah, sure.
So that would have been no. That would have got no for me. It actually happened before I started picking Batman up again. At that point.
Okay.
I wasn't reading in my mid-teens, and one of the things that got me back was the death of Jason Todd. I'd heard about it, and then
because you were glad they killed him, or because the story was good?
Well, actually, the story was good. I'd actually not been reading for a couple of years, and I didn't even realize that Dick Grayson was replaced, actually.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I stopped.
So you didn't know about Nightwing at all?
No.
Wow.
I stopped reading comics when I was 12, about around 83. And then 88 was when I started reading comics again, because I kept hearing too many amazing things. Like, the Jason Todd Robin was killed, and the Hulk had turned gray, and Spider-Man had a black suit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I didn't mention that with the comic stuff from earlier, but that was also the same year that Venom first appeared.
Yeah, and that's the thing I noticed.
McFarlane was still drawing on Spider-Man.
That's one of the interesting things about the late 80s, was things started to change. There was in the mid 80s there was like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Secret Wars, and that really did shake things up, I think, status quo wise, for both companies.
And then naturally, of course, Frank Miller with Batman did that for Batman. I mean, that was the. What's weird is that Death in the Family happened the same year as Killing Joke.
Mm-hmm.
and of course happens afterwards. I mean that's a rough year in the Batman universe, man. when Joker walks up and puts a cap in Barbara Gordon, and then he kills Jason Todd with a crowbar.
Quite a successful year for the Joker.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well for himself, and after all of that, gets diplomatic immunity.
Mm-hmm.
That was the part of that story that I thought was just really kind of heart-wrenching for Batman. I love that. Like, I don't know how well you remember it, Manos, but there's this part in the third issue. And by the way, I read it today for the first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I knew things about it, and I had seen panels here and there, but I never actually sat down and read it. I've read Killing Joke, I've read a lot of the stuff around it, and actually, what's funny is I've read Lonely Place of Dying, but I hadn't read this.
Oh, wow.
And I actually have Lonely Place of Dying, and I got this so that I could read it for this because I felt a little embarrassed. I'd never actually sat down and read it. And the thing that I thought was the most interesting was not so much Jason Todd's death, but just how rough it made things for Batman. I mean, like in the third issue of this, and by the way, if you want to check this out, it runs in Batman 426 to 429, and it is reprinted lots of times in trade. I think they're just about to put it out again. I saw that on Amazon. There's another new edition of it about to come out. Okay. Yeah, they keep reprinting it, which is cool. But anyway, in the third issue, Superman shows up, and the government has asked him to make sure to be kind of Batman's bodyguard and make sure that Batman doesn't do anything to the Joker. Because the Joker has somehow rather finagled it so that he's got diplomatic immunity when he's on foreign soil.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love some of the exchanges between Batman and Superman. When Superman says, I'll do, Batman's like, are you really going to stop me? Really? This is the Joker. Like, are you really going to split hairs and stop me? And Superman says, well, I'll do whatever I have to. And then Batman later throws that back in his face when he's saying that he's got to get the Joker after he reveals to Superman that Jason Todd was Robin, and he says, well, to quote you, I'm going to do whatever I have to. I love that. It's great stuff. It was written by Jim Starlin, who I like a lot. It of course has that really really famous full page panel in the and by the way, they kill him off in the second issue of 4, which is kind of cool because like I said, it's the stuff that happens afterwards that's much more interesting than his actual death. And they've got that great full page spread of Batman holding the dead Robin, and I like that a lot because it has such finality to it. Like Robin's dead before Batman gets to him. So we don't get that sappy, cliched moment where Robin says something to him just before he dies. He's just dead already. And that adds a lot of weight to it. And plus it's also important that with a comic book death you have a body.
Well, apparently that is not important anymore.
No, well, not anymore, but I'm just saying so that we know, naturally they always bring people back, but at least we know that they were dead in the first place. That sort of thing.
What I find frustrating is that having a body was important at one point in comics. Mm-hmm. Usually,
and it was important here. I mean, Denny O'Neil made a huge deal out of, and we're not bringing him back.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen
unless Judd Winnick wants to. Then we'll, keep him dead.
What do you mean? Did he say that?
No, he didn't. No, I'm just.
Oh, I was gonna say. Yeah, well, Judd Winnick later, of course, did. Yeah, that's right.
But yeah,
I'm saying that I mean, to Denny O'Neil's credit, he held to that for as long as he could hold to that.
Well, when he was in charge, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously he's not in charge anymore. So.
Right.
Like, hey, let's bring Jason Todd back. Ooh, okay. I think
and the most frustrating thing,
process.
I mean, not that I want to get into this too much, but I mean, the most frustrating thing about bringing Jason Todd back was that they retconned stuff that happened in Hush. I mean, not that Hush is the best thing ever, but I mean, like, when they played around with that in Hush, it wasn't really Jason Todd.
Yeah.
And it really felt like when that came out, because I read it when it came out, it really felt like they were solidifying, no, it's not Jason Todd, it will never be Jason Todd.
Mm-hmm.
Is how I read it, when that came out. And I loved that.
That was how it was supposed to be, and I remember Judd Winnick in an interview said he felt that was a missed opportunity, that they didn't bring him back. So that's what kind of led him into this train of thought of bringing him back, and complete with explaining in the retcon that, oh yeah, he like jumped in and just so, I don't know, he could say hi.
Yeah.
And then jump out and get replaced by Clayface. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, great work there. I also this was mainstay artist Jim Aparo did this, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Who did Batman forever, mainly during the 70s. If it wasn't Marshall Rogers during the 70s, it was Jim Aparo, and throughout the 80s.
And that's not to gush too much over this because there's some stuff story-wise I don't like with it, but I mean that's my favorite kind of Batman art.
Yeah, well, I liked the political stuff actually.
But yeah, some of the political stuff is good. I like that Joker is broke and he's his whole thing is just trying to get a bunch of money and he blames Reaganomics for being broke.
Yeah, and just the fact that it took Batman and Robin. Well, actually, a lot of the story had to do with trying to find Jason Todd's mother. Actually,
it did, and nobody talks about that. One of the most interesting things is that one of the people that he narrows it down to 3 that it might be, and one of them is Shiva.
Yeah, and that was actually the first time I ever saw Lady Shiva in a comic.
They really treat her like somebody who hasn't been used a lot at this point.
Yeah, and I wasn't familiar with her. This was my first introduction to the character. And I remember thinking, wow, Batman needed to cheat to beat her in a fight. I was just...
Yeah.
It was a little kind of like unsettling for a second. This woman who was so deadly and dangerous that Batman had to cheat.
Yeah, although, yeah, I felt that way too, although what's the thing that's really good about it is that he compares her to Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, because she's on that level. She's probably the best.
And the other thing is, I don't think he necessarily. My speculation is he didn't actually have to cheat, but he didn't feel like fighting her in the first place.
Yeah.
Because he says, look, I don't have time for this. I don't want to fight you right now. And she only fights him because she wants to see if she'll win.
Yeah.
She's like, I want a challenge. This looks like fun. And Batman actually says, I'm not in the mood.
Yeah. Well,
I'm in the middle of something important. And so I think that's why he cheats. Because he's just like, I don't feel like even doing this right now. He's like, I don't know, leave me alone. Things to do.
But yeah, I think she is supposed to be, before Cassandra Cain, she's like the best fighter in the DCU.
Yeah.
And there was some pretty killer stuff in this book.
I think the thing that I dislike about it the most is just that it makes Batman look kind of like a moron for ever using Jason Todd in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And not that Batman should never make mistakes and stuff, but it seems like he's just no good at all at telling when people aren't where they ought to be or aren't good at something, and that's not Batman to me. And so that was kind of strange. Where at the beginning of this book, Jason Todd's starting to go a little too far when he's fighting people and stuff, and it's obvious that he's got kind of a vengeance thing going on. And you get the sense that he's kind of always been like that, and the Batman is just now picking up on it.
Well, there was
I don't know. That's how I felt about it.
There was an issue not long before this storyline came out. Was Jason Todd had maybe killed a guy,
right? Yeah,
and that had a lot of controversy going on because they never. I don't know if they even really answered that. That he may or may not may not have pushed a criminal to his death, and he told Batman the guy fell. And it's still kind of left in the open as if he really did it or not.
What's really interesting about Batman Mythos is that we keep holding to things that felt like they made sense 70 years ago in a way they don't now.
Mm.
If that makes any sense.
It does.
So, it worked with Dick Grayson because the writers wrote Dick Grayson in such a way where, oh yeah, he can become a crime fighter right after his parents get murdered, and he's fine. Then later on, Batman tries it with this other guy, and now it's the 80s, and he's edgy, and he kills people, or maybe he kills people, but he certainly does things that Batman would never do. And, certainly I would rather that than just retconning, the original Robin in the first place, like, other people might do later. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But it's still, it's kind of funny that that's how these stories start to go, is that, we don't still say that in the continuity that Batman was training Dick Grayson in the 40s, but it's still that mentality.
But also, if you think about it, if you have 4 or 5 different Robins, they're all not going to react the same way,
That's true, but when you, but when Jason Todd does this, we as readers react in a way that we never would have thought about with Dick Grayson, where we're like, Batman, what are you doing having this kid fighting with you when he just had his parents murdered and who knows exactly how old he is?
Mm-hmm.
I read one of the, because I was reading this in single issues, and one of the letters pages at the end, somebody wrote in and said, when Jason Todd first started, the way people were drawing him, we couldn't tell if he was 13 or 18. Nobody knew.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen some early Jason Todd stuff, and I imagine that's true of the artists. Like, they had no idea.
I think he's supposed to be older than Tim Drake ultimately.
A related note. Some artists had no idea how old to draw Rogue from the X-Men.
Oh, really?
Because she had that gray in her hair. And if you look at some of her early appearances, she looks like she's 50. Instead of like, a teenager, however old she was supposed to be when she first started. And I imagine that was the same way with Jason Todd, too. It's like, how old is this kid? Let me draw a kid kind of character.
Well, this is, just to cap this off, this is one of those stories that's really obviously historically relevant, but I recommend it too. I think it's a good read.
I do. It's a very important Batman story. It's not exactly Dark Knight Returns, but it's a very important piece of Batman mythos, and I dig it a lot. It's a very 80s. Batman story of this time, without feeling really, with the exception of the Ayatollah being in the story, it doesn't feel too dated.
Yeah, I mean, people who are used to more current Batman might look at this and wonder why I'm saying this, but it was actually edgier than a lot of Batman stories at the time because Batman decked people out in a way he didn't usually at that point. I mean, like, Batman himself was more violent in this.
Well, that's
than he had been in other places.
That's the Frank Miller influence that's starting to seep in at this point to the regular books. Because, there's the Frank Miller Year One storyline, which was in the regular books, but, of course, it took place in the past. There's the Dark Knight Returns, which was the miniseries, which maybe not happening, alternate future. But those were so popular, they became part of who Batman was.
Right.
And actually reestablishing, it depends on who you talk to, that aspect of Batman, which, was a very violent character in his infancy, like the late 30s when he was created.
Well, spoiler warning, but he tries to hit Superman in this.
Yeah, he kind of forgot himself for a second.
He loses it, and then he almost breaks his hand.
Yeah. I love that moment, too.
It's cool.
Because Superman told him, like, if I hadn't have broken with that punch, you would have, like, broken your hand or something like that.
Oh, yeah, he says, if I hadn't taken a step back. Yeah, that's right.
And it still hurt him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he said you would have been crippled. As it was, he just broke something.
See, that's a friend.
Well, Manos, let's come back to the present, shall we?
All right.
And what year are we going to travel to next time?
I believe we're going to be going back to 1955.
1955. We're going to pull it Back to the Future and go back to 1955.
That's right.
Thanks a lot for watching the Pop Culture Yearbook, and we'll see you again next time. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm the real Manos.
And we'll see you later.